This will be a quick episode. I just want to use a few minutes here to talk about what the Tyreek Hill contract news actually means for player and organization. For lack of a better term, we will call it a contract adjustment that he and the Dolphins agreed to the other weekend. I searched around right after hearing the news, but couldn't much on the details initially. So I looked at the previous contract extension he signed, which was prior to the 2022 season coming over in the Kansas City trade, and a few things jumped out. 2024 was scheduled to be the first season where he was going to count as a significant cap hit, even though this will be his third season on the team. And that is not irregular when it comes to big money players and the timing of player X signing the contract and then when the organization actually begins to absorb the hit to the salary cap. Remember, the flexibility teams get from paying players via bonuses is beneficial to them because it allows them to do the accounting equivalent of kicking the can. And as we've seen over the past 5, 10, 20 plus years, the salary cap continues to increase year over year, almost without fail. There was an exception back in 2011 where the cap that year ended up being $120.4 million, which was down from $123 million in 2009. If you remember, 2011 was the lockout summer. It was actually both the NBA and NFL in lockout situations at the same time. And just for the record, 2010 was that one-off uncapped year, so that's why the spread I just mentioned stretches from 2009 to 2011. And then we also saw a pullback in 2021, but keep in mind, that was coming off of the COVID year. It was understood well before the 2021 season that the cap would be drastically reduced, so that's more of an anomaly. But as far as the point I'm making about the cap steadily rising, the cap was $133 million in 2014. It is now $255 million. You're talking nearly double in just the past decade alone. The reason I point to the growth in salary cap is as you defer money charged against your salary cap, that money becomes less and less of a percentage of the overall cap as time moves forward. As an example, if I push a $10 million cap hit out from this current season to a future seasons, or perhaps multiple seasons, it's less of a burden on this year's books, and then in the future years where the charges hit, there's also a benefit. That's just a fact. It's how the math works. And if you've been following the Miami Dolphins offseason, they've been spending money. Tua and Waddle alone total over $350 million in contract values. So I think this was a long time coming, both in terms of market value for a player of Tyreek Hill's talent and proven levels of production. We saw a bunch of wide receivers sign big extensions this offseason, most of whom, maybe with the exception of Justin Jefferson, are not as good or not as important to their offense as Hill is. I think the timing of the Tua deal is what pushed this out a little bit, but this Hill extension was always coming. In the first 2 years with the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill has been paid about $53 million, but he's only counted for a total of about $19 million against the cap in the past 2 seasons. That's the combined cap hit, again, for 2022 and 2023. And before this new deal that they just signed, he was scheduled to make about $20 million this year while counting for over $31 million on the cap. And then the cap hit was going to be $34 million in 2025 and $56 million in 2026. But now with this contract adjustment, those cap charges are as follows. 2024, $31.9 million, so not much of a change there. But then 2025, $27.7, and then 2026, $51.9. That is a nice reduction for the Dolphins in terms of the cap. What was going to be about $65, $66 million across 2024 and 2025 is now dropped to about $59.5. And then at the same time, Hill also gets a significant bump. On the previous deal, he was scheduled to make about 42-ish total for 24 and 25. Now that number jumps to $54 million. Now, the breaking point will be prior to the 2026 season. When you have a $52 million cap charge coming due, I fully expect a restructure of some sort, likely a short-term extension, which will, again, give the Dolphins a chance to reduce some of that number and smooth it out over multiple seasons. However, none of this happens in a vacuum. So we'll have to see where they're at with their other good players, but that's the most likely scenario. Think of this reworked deal as the bridge to the future extension. And again, a shorter term extension as Tyreek Hill will be, 32 going into that 2026 season. It gives the Dolphins some temporary cap flexibility while also paying the player his market value. But as crazy as this sounds, because it sure feels like this new look Dolphins team, new offensive philosophy, and just overall team personality with Mike McDaniel there now, they are only a couple seasons away from having to make some tough decisions on how the team will be rebuilt. You can't have $500 million tied up in 3 players for the long term. Even with the accounting tricks and the salary cap increases, the bill always comes due. So they are in, and while I cannot stand this term because it's just so cliche, the Dolphins are very much in win now mode. They're in a situation where they're going to have to peak within these next 2 seasons. I believe this is the year they overtake the Bills as the top dog in the division. The Patriots are not going to be a threat, and I think the Jets can make the playoffs, but I don't see them as being better than Miami. So they need to strike while the iron is hot. This is largely the same roster coming back, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Let's see if they take advantage. Thank you for listening.